Dear friends, the present topic of my discussion with you is locating ideology in media education. As all of us know, ideology as a politico-economic concept has its own place in any social order. Justifiably, mass media cannot always be ideology neutral. They do advocate and interpret issues and events. The role of mass media in the ideological world has been historically recognized. It was the Frankfurt School of Thought that described the wider ideological spread of the media. True, the Frankfurt School had its roots in Marxism and also in neo-Marxism. It all started with a critique of media ownership controlled by capitalists and corporations. Later on a wider canvas, the media treatment of race, ethnicity, trade union, and social movements, past and new, were also included. Let us first get into the meaning, rather the definition of ideology. It is interpreted within quotes as any social policy which in part or in whole derived from social theory in conscious way, end quotes. This is what is widely accepted in the free enterprise system like the United States of America. In contrast, the Marxist view considers ideologies as, within quotes, ideas which arise from a given set of material interest, end quotes, in the course of struggle for power. The other definitions of ideology are: number one, an ideology is a consistent set of related ideas about the nature and goals of society, such as liberalism, conservatism, or socialism. The second one, ideology means a set of ideas or vision represented by media through meaning making and representations. The third one, ideology refers to everyday discourses and practices. From the critical perspective, ideology provides an interpretative mechanism of everyday experiences. For Dennis McQuail, ideology is unintended and hidden. It is embedded in text and difficult to define or detect. According to Karl Marx, the hierarchical social class system was responsible for all social problems. This can be ended only through a workers' revolution. The workers constitute the proletariat. For Marx, culture was being manipulated to confuse the common people in order to make them work against their own interests. He used the term ideology as a substitute for these forms of exploitative culture. Ideology, accordingly, promoted, within quotes, a false consciousness among the common people. Such an ideology was like opium. Under its influence, people cannot understand that they are being cheated. Louis Althusser, a French philosopher, described mass media as ideological state apparatuses along with religion, family, and education. Media not only define ideology but also interpret it to the benefit of audiences in their own way. The question here is, does it not lead to value judgment? The mass media have also been designated as cultural industry, presenting a critical view of cultural role of media. The culture ideology interlink has been well established. The ISA, as it is abbreviated, would act as a guardian of a culture's dominant values and norms. These are also the channels to transmit what is called as the rules of conduct in a society. Althusser also made a reference to RSA, that is, repressive state apparatuses that are endowed with coercive power or use of physical power. It is physically present and culturally concealed. Critics like Herbert Schiller have criticized the impact of corporatization of culture that includes the media. The capitalist ideology of culture is recycling it in a repetitive manner to earn profit, sidelining creativity of any kind. Schiller's opinion of culture is that the new process involves appropriating the hearts and minds of the consumers of culture, within quotes. For him, corporates have taken over public expression into their hands and have become para-electoral power. The rise of corporate ideology has affected the independent views of individuals. The corporate takeover of culture is as good as corporatization of ideology of a monopolistic type. Yet another description of ideology is, quotes, institutional practices which people draw upon without thinking often embody assumptions which directly or indirectly legitimize existing power relations, end quotes. Since media education permits an evaluation of all aspects of life from culture to politics, it is imperative to discuss ideological overtones of every aspects of life. A critical appraisal of everything under the sun shall be the motto of media education at large, because, within quotes, people internalize what is socially produced, end quotes. Training students to fit into the existing system is a power game on either side of ideology. Should not media students understand the motivational forces behind such often subtle strategies of mind management? Nationalism is a major ideological product in any society. Besides, nationalistic sentiments tend to be aggressive. Nationalism deals directly with the emotional pangs of the masses, and nationalism can be related to political convictions or religious eruditions. Politico-economic basis of ideology has been the mainstay of nationalistic tendencies. In Nazi Germany, ethnic hate became the core idea of nationalism. The various ideological discourses have affected the media contents and language in the world. Donald MacDonald, on the question, "Can the press tell the truth?" points out how ideology affects the issue of objectivity in journalism. When media opt for ideological stances, mainly political, they become partisan, and it will lead to advocacy journalism. Nationalistic discourses lead to the creation of synthetic media campaigns which will damage the concept of media objectivity, especially in news contents. The dictum, within quotes, "facts are sacred, comment is free," will be given a farewell. In any democratic setup, objectivity becomes a torchbearer of truthful journalism. The media, in pursuit of their goals, corporate or otherwise, create myths. Rolla Barthes made a statement within quotes, that the significance of myth is its ability to transform the meaning of history and therefore of truth. Close the inverted comma. Thus, mediated myth of nationalism overtakes the reality of life. Ideology should contribute to the plurality of thinking in a society. Unfortunately, it makes the entire discourse one sided propaganda. A language is a tool of media to interpret. Media, through language, represent the natural and social worlds that media students inhabit along with their values, beliefs, and assumptions. It is well said that, within quotes, people internalize what is socially produced, end quotes. In other words, the social background of a person determines his ideological leanings. In the modern world, it has always been a choice between capitalist powers versus proletariat power. For a long time, the state power has remained monopolistic and impregnable. In such a context, ideologies become, within quotes, institutional practices which people draw upon without thinking, often embody assumptions which directly or indirectly legitimize the existing power relations. End quotes. Often, mass media have been expected to be the voice of the voiceless. However, the contrary has become true. The critics say that media have become the voice of the powerful, within quotes. Ideological power, the power to project one's own practices as universal and common sense, is a significant complement to economic and political power, and of particular significance here because it is exercised in discourse. End quotes. We have to know that power relations are always relations of struggle. They may even border on violence. In fact, ideology will lead us to an analysis of society in which we live to understand the power relations. If ideological connotations are power relations, neutrality is not possible. As already mentioned, advocacy becomes the underpinning of ideological meanings. The BBC guide elaborates this in a different way. Neutrality is impossible in a conflict between justice and injustice, or truth versus untruth. It is also true in the classrooms of media education when we start situating academic discourses within larger political and economic practices of nations. This is inevitable because hegemony in every type of order is real. It operates at local, national, and global levels. On its own, any hegemonic order is ideologically real and really ideological, while nationalist communication may not reveal the truth. Persuasive communication embedded in advertising and public relations will blur the thin distinction between truth and untruth, and also between fake and factual news in the post-truth era. Once again, it is to understand that, within quotes, propaganda uses communication to convey a message, an idea, and an ideology that is designed to primarily serve the self-interests of the person or people doing the communications. End quotes. Italian scholar Antonio Gramsci has argued that, within quotes, a state of hegemony is achieved when a provisional alliance of certain group exerts a consensus which makes the power of the dominant group appear natural and legitimate. End quotes. It is said that hegemony operates without any problem if there is a high degree of social, economic, political, and cultural security in a society. If there is no such security, hegemony will face danger. Ideologies change, and so also hegemonies. Since hegemonies vary at different times depending upon varying circumstances, their impact on society is also varied. However, there is one common element in all of them, that is the controlling influence of ideology. Its public expression is described in personal terms as values. Ideology is present in every sphere of our activity. Every power is suffused by ideological orientations. In power relations, the dominant position is war of competition. It provides the conceptual cement that upholds the structures of the powerful and defends their interests, and is instrumental in helping in preserving the status quo, the way things are, the way they are ordered. A few communication scholars have evaluated the context of dominant social, political, and economic institutions using mass media to hold on to power. Others analyze the structures responsible for the distinction between the powerful and the powerless. Hegemony means controlling people through ideas with their consent. Family, religion, education, politics, and government help reinforce the mainstream beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. Two dominant and rival ideological strands or hegemonies are capitalism and socialism, as already stated. These two ideologies were totally different. With glasnost breaking the communist barriers, a new hegemonic order appeared. Commercialization or corporatization of human life became the order of the day. As a result, we have witnesses to the emergence of powerful media corporations. Thus, the discussion on public-owned media against private media can also be identified as an issue of ideology. The debate includes functions, roles, and performances of media in a society. Today, the dominant ideology of capitalism has become flexible and liberal. If the ideological stances become dominant, the concept of objectivity gets relegated. Advocacy becomes stronger. What happens if news becomes an ideological construct? It becomes biased. If media propose ideological agenda for the nation, the issue of journalistic neutrality falls by wayside. Ideology, as the crux of news, will include variables of access, drama, proximity, and importance. The last two, proximity and importance, will have to play a secondary role to ideology. Ideological news values hinge upon the moral political discourse of a society. Imagine that there is no ideology to dominate in a society, and then the mass media do not have any stance to opt for and tend to be neutral. Ideology entrenches stereotypes of individuals and issues. Conflicts arise when stereotypes are contested in the public domain, especially through the media. Knowingly or unknowingly, mass media get involved in both advocacy and contestation, as all of us know. And it is an issue of politics of presentation. The mass media cannot escape from getting involved in such a sticky and tricky situation. Can media help erase cranky stereotypes? The reverse is mostly true. Media texts are still dominated by the issues of identity, representation, and resistance. Identity assertion is a crucial domain of media operation. Its canvas is huge as it varies from race, ethnicity, and gender to political, economic, and cultural aspects. Media representation of these strands has offered an enormous scope for research. For example, feminist media discourses have emerged from identity and representational analysis of media texts. As research areas expand, new ideological concepts keep emerging. Every ideological struggle starts with language. The power of language should be understood to understand the ideological diversities in the world. Language will help us identify the ideological constructs and produces meaning. In turn, we should know that these constructs and meanings vary ideologically. Critics argue that, within quotes, ideology certainly does not give the impression of having a single fixed meaning, end quotes. This is possible due to individual perceptions that may also give rise to disruptive orientations. Disruptions and distortions do dot the ideological canvas due to complex power relations. Such a context necessitates the understanding of the power value of mediated communication by media students. They will definitely identify the fact that ideology has many meanings. The latter half of the 20th century saw that globalization became a reality due to technological advancements. The rise of transitional corporations with ever expanding footprints all over the world narrowed down the ideological overtones of economic policies. The impact of corporatization on ideology has produced a commercial ideology even in the socialist countries. The advent of concepts like controlled capitalism and crony capitalism is a clear proof of the impact of commercialization on ideology. The use of media for commercial advancement can be seen in the magnitude of corporate ownership of media houses. The increased shrinkage of public sphere and domination of corporate entities have invariably influenced the media role and performance in any democratic polity. The present scenario calls for decentering global hegemony of a few corporate players in political, social, economic, and cultural spheres. Media activism is not a new phenomenon. The adversarial role of media cannot be undermined because the popular faith in the mass media is grand. The task of countering state power or corporate power should become part of media activism, but it is not. Decentering global hegemony of corporate power in all spheres of human activity is an ideal but difficult task. Sustaining media activism is not that easy due to cartelization of media in addition to media monopoly. The marketplace economy has its stranglehold on media operations to the detriment of ideological activism by the mass media. Institutionalization of media strategies in ideological context nowadays has become impractical. Of course, there have been isolated examples of individual efforts with ideological underpinnings. These are marginally effective and keep the ideological fire burning. In the corporate discourse of media operations, public relations is used to nurture public in favor of a particular ideology. Today, mass communication is equated with public relations for all practical purposes. In such a context, keeping varied ideological fervor for the sustenance of true democracy based on dissent is a Herculean task. Obviously, it leads to unity of thoughts, of actions, and orientations. Ideologies have many confusing characteristics. They are political ideologies have strong influence on masses. An ideological perspective need not be biased. The next one is individuals with a high level of ideological consistency are highly informed. The next one is the ideological bias is treated as a failure of information processing by cognitive psychology. Going further, we can say that for many social psychologists, sticking to a particular ideology reflects intolerance and close-mindedness. Then, ideologues are most rational citizens and active participants in the political process. The next confusion comes from the statement that ideological bias can produce pluralistic ignorance. It means others' views are ignored. Pluralistic ignorance and ideological bias are considered to be the end products of misinformation. Ideology is always inherent in mass communicated messages, so goes another statement. At the end of the 20th century, ideology as the basis of conflict was replaced by cultural identity in the form of ethnic and religious differences. Pluralistic ignorance takes place when individuals underestimate or overestimate others who have the same opinion as they have themselves. Ideology as a classroom discourse needs democratization of knowledge production. It also needs, within quotes, ideological frames for constructing viable media narratives, end quote. Should not media students examine the pros and cons of interlinking media operations with ideological overtones? The answer is a firm yes to build socially responsive young minds, and you and I are responsible for it. Thank you.